Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have a review here for a television show that I don't really talk about television that much on my channel, so it must be special, and let me tell you, it is. This is a show that I started watching a little bit of, or most of for that matter, before I got married, and I reviewed a couple of the seasons, I think even two, on my Goosebumps channel called Michael Goosebumps Fan, in case you're curious to look for that if you happen to be familiar with this channel and not that one. This is a show that blew me away when I saw it, and I kind of watched it out of order. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to let you know up front, I recommend this show basically in every facet that I could, but also number two, I will not spoil anything for you, because I want everyone that has not watched this show before, especially if you love anthology horror shows specifically, I want you to check this out. I want you to give it a chance, because there's so much to talk about with this. But I'm not going to spoil anything in the review, but I want you to go check it out because of how amazing this show is. Anyway, it was a Sci-Fi Channel, Sci-Fi app, whatever, series that ran from 2016 to 2018 and sadly got canceled. It makes me very sad because I did not know it existed when it was on television, and I absolutely would have watched this week to week. I binged the hell out of the show when I first discovered it because of how great it was. This show is called Channel Zero. And this is a 4-season set right here. Each season only has 2 discs, and they put it out on a physical collection here. You better buy your copies as soon as you can, because it's not going to be around forever, dude, I promise you. Channel Zero is magnificent. Magnificent. There is not much horror TV, or TV in general, nowadays, that affects me the way this does. There's a reason I don't watch TV anymore, like newer TV shows and stuff. It's because they suck. This is on the verge of being 8 years old at this point, and it makes me sad that no one knows about it. Except for really hardcore horror anthology fans. No one knows about this show, and it deserves love. Basically, the idea for Channel Zero is that, number one, it's basically American Horror Story done correctly. My biggest complaint with American Horror Story, despite loving Season 3, loving what I saw of Season 4, Season 1 was good for a time and then it fell apart. Season 2 was good for a time and then fell apart. And even the seasons I like Season 3, the final episode is pretty bad. Season 1's final episode is bad. I typically have an issue with that show because the seasons are too long. 10 episodes, 12 episodes, whatever they may be, is too much to not have enough story the way they do. The casts are pretty good and whatever, but it never really landed it like I thought it needed to. This series does that. It's just like American Horror Story in the sense of every single season is its own standalone season. They're their own story per season, and I thought originally about reviewing each of these seasons individually. I kind of decided against it because I feel like I don't need to, you know, but I wouldn't hate on anybody who did. I would love to see some of my friends in the horror community talk about this, whether it be BD, Horror, FFA, Grayson, any of you guys out there, because of how magnificent this show is and how much love it deserves, dude. But again, it's going to scare you to the core. There's something about this show that is just unnerving, you know? Now, it's basically an adaptation per season of Creepypasta. Now, Creepypasta, in case you don't happen to know, I guess I'll cover this. They're essentially horror stories that are kind of short stories listed on things like the Reddit, subreddit, whatever, No Sleep, or they're just stories that have been scattered along the internet. They've been rewritten sometimes. The first story I ever read on a random app that I got of short horror stories was one that happened to be the first season of the show, or adapted into the first season of the show, called Candle Cove, right here, with this monster made of teeth. So, when I found out about this show, I actually saw Season 4 called The Dream Door down here. And that's what absolutely hooked me on this show. I had to watch it, and I was obsessed with this show when I first saw it. The Dream Door is easily my favorite season, Candle Cove being possibly my favorite creepypasta short story of all time, but also possibly my second favorite season of the show. It is phenomenal. It is absolutely amazing. And I guess I'll kind of cover a little bit about each of the seasons. Number one, they're 6 episodes apiece. Yeah. So they get the pacing down perfectly. They have just enough story to tell kind of like a mini-series, like back in those old days with Stephen King adaptations. And it's great for that. But Candle Cove, I guess I'll talk about this first. Basically the idea, based on the short story that I love so much, and it's pretty faithful to that, with also kind of filling it out with some good stuff. Not filler, but filling it out with story, with characters. Basically, there's a guy that comes back to his hometown, and he and a lot of his friends from back in the day kind of talk about a particular kids show they used to watch called Candle Cove that they can't find out on the internet or anything, whether it existed or not. Nobody seems to know about it. And their parents even say, like, when you were kids, you were sitting in your rooms watching TV and it was just static. And I'm like, number one, did you not have concern for your kids when they were doing that? That's creepy. Number two, the idea of that existing when you read the short story is great. The show does it even better. The show has so many ideas in it, so many themes per season too, that really haunt you. And I think Candle Cove does that extremely well. The character writing in this show, for every season, even the weakest of the seasons, which I'll get to in a moment, are phenomenal. The performances in every single season, even the weakest, is phenomenal. They're always great. I don't care who it is, what actor, what character, they did such an amazing job of not just putting new people into everything to fill out seasons with just kind of plot lines that didn't really matter. They didn't do that. They really made full-fledged seasons that made sense in every way possible. Every scene, every second, every shot, every frame of the show mattered. Candle Cove, when I watched it, it was the second season of the show I watched because, like I said, I started on the 4th season. You don't have to watch them in order. But season 1, Candle Cove, scared me so bad when I watched it. It's one of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life, and TV does not creep me out at all. So that should say a lot about it. Moving on to season 2, though. It's called No End House, and as the picture shows here, it's kind of about being a prisoner of the mind, but in this case, about a young girl who lost, I think it was her dad, if I remember correctly, and you'll know the actor, too. She lost her dad, if I remember correctly, but a lot of the theme of this season is loss and grief. I haven't read No End House. I haven't read all of these stories. I haven't read season 3's story, Butcher's Block, either. I did read Candle Cove and season 4's Dream Door, and that's about it. But No End House, I never read anything about. But basically, I think if I remember correctly, it was like a Halloween thing, I think. But anyway, there's like a suburban area where a girl and her friends go into this house. They go from like room to room and experience creepy things. And eventually they get put into a situation where they're kind of like living in an upside down reality of some sort. And I don't want to tell you too much, but dude, it is so sad. It's one of the saddest seasons of TV I have ever watched in my life. It's one of the saddest horror-related things I've ever experienced in my life. You can watch each of these seasons in like 4 or 5 hours, somewhere in there, 4.5 hours if I think I did the math correctly. But No End House really, really fucked me up. It was so upsetting. My wife watched Candle Cove with me. She was so affected by Candle Cove, she would not sit in on No End House. And I think she came in at one point and sat down on the couch when we first got married and I was watching this. And I think she saw a little bit of season 2, and she cried, if I remember correctly. And that was super, it was noteworthy to me to say that somebody who doesn't even like horror, who doesn't even like television, who didn't even watch most of this show, was super affected by this because of how wonderfully performed it was, once again. But number 2, how well written it is. And again, the creep factor of this is shocking, I think. No End House is not as good as Candle Cove, but it's pretty great in its own regard, man. Both of those first 2 seasons I would give a 5 out of 5 star rating to, by the way. I guess I'll kind of rate each individual season as I talk about them, but those first 2, 5 out of 5, easily. They're very different goals they're trying to get to. They're executed in very different ways, but man, they're wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And then I'll talk about season 3 now, which is the final season I had to watch to be able to make this video. It's this one right here called Butcher's Block. Now, we have all heard of the idea, myth, urban legend, in this case creepypasta, of people finding staircases that are just in the middle of the woods. And I've read other books in the past. I think there was a horror novel I read years ago. I think it was Ralph something. I cannot remember his name. Ralph Mafia. I don't know what his name was, but it was something about a stairway in the lake or staircase in the lake, something like that. And that was the first time I'd ever experienced this idea of just wandering in the woods, finding a random staircase that goes up to nowhere. In this story, apparently if you go out to like a local park on the bad side of town at midnight or around that time, you'll find a staircase that leads up to an actual door that isn't there during the daytime, in the woods. And a girl who has a sister who happens to be struggling with drugs, they have a bad past with their mom, they happen to be moving into this new town, the main character girl is trying to get a job, and her sister, being hooked on drugs, is kind of just bored, laying around not helping with bills. I assume she's a younger sister, she's in recovery supposedly, but the main sister doesn't know she still smokes and whatever. But they get caught up into a situation when her sister and her happen to wander into this woods area when they see this little red midget wearing a red cloak. He's deformed looking. They happen to wander up that staircase at one point and go into this door and experience some weird things. Now, the main actor you will know from this show that's in this season is Rutger Hauer from, what is it, Blade Runner? Yeah, I think he played Roy from Blade Runner. Anyway, great actor. He's really good here. Butcher's Block, aka Season 3, was a massive disappointment. I thought it was way too art house. By the end of it, I'm willing enough to admit that I'm too stupid to understand what they were trying to do. I thought it was messy, but it's the weakest season, easily, but it was not bad. Does that make sense? It was very watchable. I loved these characters. I thought every performance, once again, was really good from everybody in this season. You had a lot of weirdos that hung out with Rutger Hauer that were really good, but I just did not love Season 3 at all. I thought it had some really good things about it, some beautifully shot and directed and performed moments, but the writing overall was a mess. And again, I haven't read Butcher's Block, the story. I kind of want to now just to see if it's any good, any worse than what this was, if it can give kind of some kind of explanation for what I watched. It felt like a Jodorowsky's Dune situation where like you had someone making complete nonsense. Not because they didn't have a plan from the get-go of the season, from before they even shot anything. I'm not saying that. It just feels like I'm too dumb to understand what they did here. I don't know. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. If you love Season 3, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it down below and what you liked, what you didn't like. Was it the best season for you? Was it the worst season for you? If I had to rate this season on a 5-star basis, I'd probably give it like a 3 out of 5. It was a massive disappointment. I'm glad that when I watched this show, I watched it out of order, because Season 4, to me, is the best, called The Dream Door once again. The Dream Door was phenomenal. It is phenomenal. It is terrifying. It's eerie. It doesn't have the same kind of terrifying nature as Candle Cove, though. It's very different in that regard. Every season varies so much, and I really like that about it. Again, this show, I think, is American Horror Story done well. Every season varies just enough to be different, to be memorable in its own way. Each season is kind of iconic, even the weakest season, like Butcher's Block. But Dream Door was the first one I watched, again, and it was super memorable. And if I had went from 1, 2, 3, and then tried to get to 4, I think I would have been so burnt out with how rough Season 3 was, for me and my taste, maybe for yours, that Season 4 would have put me off, and I probably would have ended up making that take a while to get to. I don't know. I don't binge watch things like a lot of people do. I can with movies, because movies can vary. I can watch a comedy and then a horror and so on and so on. But if I had hit the Season 3 slump with this show, I would tell you outright, try out Season 4. The Dream Door, though, let's talk about that a little bit more. Right here, basically, a young woman and her husband happen to move into their new house. And there's this really weird door down in the basement that they were never told about. And I think when they viewed the house, it wasn't there. They happen to go down into this basement area, and I think the wife does. And when she gets down to the bottom, there's an even longer staircase that leads further down in a very weird way, way underground. And she finds another door, opens it up, and happens to be looking around, and her childhood imaginary friend called Pretzel Jack comes running out of the room up the staircase, and he's actually played by one of the guys who worked on the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark movie, which I'm a huge fan of. This guy, I cannot remember his name to save my life. His performance as the completely voiceless Pretzel Jack is horrific. He's a contortionist in real life, and the way he plays this role, he's not only a good contortionist who does all of this creepy shit with his body, but he in general gives a great performance. He is amazing, and he's great in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark too, as the Jangly Man, I think is what he played. But Dream Door and this Pretzel Jack character is basically about this young woman dealing with her teenhood and childhood mainly, and her imaginary friend, and how he used to comfort her, and now he's this bloodthirsty killer for some reason. Pretzel Jack is horrific. The makeup and everything. When I saw this clip of this guy on YouTube years ago, it's what made me want to check out the show. It's what immediately had me look it up on my cable streaming now thing or whatever. And I watched it, and I absolutely loved it. And I got hooked on the show, and again, eventually bought this whole set, because you couldn't watch the whole series at the time for some reason. I guess because it wasn't that popular. Dude, Dream Door is just amazing. Everything from the music, just every part of it. The music for all 4 seasons are incredible, especially 1, 2, and 4, I think are the best musical scores for the season. You have to check out Channel Zero. If I had to rate Dream Door, Season 4, on a 5-star basis, it's my favorite. It's a 5 out of 5. It's absolutely amazing, man. So at the end of the day, Channel Zero, amazing show. If you love anthology horror, even if it's not an episodic thing, if it's more season to season, like I talked about with American Horror Story and this, even if you're more of a fan of like Twilight Zone or like Tales from the Crypt, which each season is kind of a standalone thing, those tones being very different from something like this, if you like anthology shows, and you're like me and you don't like shows overstaying their welcome too often, which is way too common now, this is the show for you. This will give you faith back into TV and into horror in general. If you want something that will scare you to your core and make you think, the first 2 and the 4th season of this show will absolutely do that. Butcher's Block will entertain you in a very weird art house way, but this is amazing. It's an amazing show. It deserves more credit. It has so much variation, again, from season to season, and how they do different things. All the performances and everything just make it so incredibly great. I could not sit here and tell you enough about how much I love and adore Channel Zero, and I'm sad that it's gone. I am genuinely sad that it's over and I have no more to watch. But it is a classic, it's iconic, and everybody you talk to who has seen the show will tell you the same thing. I don't know of a single person I recommended the show to or showed it to who did not like it. Even my mom, who doesn't really love a lot of television unless it's something kind of generic like Criminal Minds or CSI or whatever, she loved it, and she thought it was great too. So Channel Zero, if I had to rate it overall, collectively, as a total show, despite season 3 being rough, I would still give it a super high 4 out of 5 stars. Maybe Butcher's Block would get better on a rewatch. I don't know, man. Those last couple of episodes really showed to me that they didn't have enough there to make it make sense, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's a taste thing. I'm going to lean towards that. Season 3 could be more of a taste thing than anything, but the rest of the show, amazing. Absolutely amazing, the stuff they did with this. I'm bummed out. Sci-Fi gets a bad rap as a channel because of things like the Asylum movies they made, like Sharknado and Sharktopus versus whatever. You know, they got a lot of bad rap for their Asylum movies, their Asylum division, but they also make things like this. And dude, when they tried to make something great, they did not promote it. The horror community did not know about it, didn't talk about it enough, and I missed out on it. I think it would have gotten so many more viewers if people had actually talked to each other about it. And dude, it was just so good. It's an absolute gem, and I want you to check it out if you haven't seen it before. It's a masterpiece in so many ways, but a really high 4 out of 5 stars is what I would give it, because it deserves a 5 out of 5, but I can't go there with how rough season 3 is. I thought for sure last week that when I was looking at the set and saying I'm going to watch season 3 at some point, I thought I was going to come to you with a review giving it a perfect 5 out of 5, maybe a 6 out of 5 for God's sake, because of how much I loved it. I can't do that, but I wanted to. I desperately wanted to. Anyway, Channel Zero, check it out if you haven't seen it before. It is a masterpiece. I guarantee you will love it. You'll be creeped out. You'll be scared by it. And if you don't like Season 3, for the love of God, please stick around and watch Season 4. 6-episode seasons, man. It's perfect. The pacing is perfect and everything. But the twists they come up with in this show are just absolutely insane, man. It just shows you can have any twist in the world work as long as you can build up the execution and the plot around it to make that make sense. And most of the time, it really pays off here. So anyway, have you seen Channel Zero? What do you think about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments about it down below. If you haven't seen it, do you plan on doing it? Does this review kind of convince you to watch it? I really hope so, because I love this shit, and I hope it gets more love, because it deserves it. You won't see me cover a lot of horror shows, like I said. Maybe over time I'll talk about more. I'm kind of running out of movies on this backlog to talk about, but, you know, maybe I'll start hitting up some TV shows. I have a lot of stuff like Knight Rider to watch, so I don't know. Anyway, Channel Zero, let me know your thoughts about it down in the comments section down below once again. Thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Catch you later, and goodbye.